Greetings, science fiction and fantasy enthusiasts. Do you read books? Do you watch films? Do you hate deodorant? Then welcome to our podcast. You're listening to No Deodorant in Outer Space with Ryan Sean O'Reilly. Now, let's get started.
Leveled, smooth as a highway is smooth, its centuries choked beneath millions and millions of tons of hardened stone, the birth of a city. It had become the death of a world, and Richard Austin was its murderer. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. My name is Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and I'll be guiding you along on this journey as we cover, on this episode, a book it's a collection of short stories by Charles Beaumont, the author, and a number of Twilight Zone episodes that are related to the short stories, or some of the short stories in this book. I think there's 6 that we're going to cover. Joining me on this episode is returning guest and independent filmmaker, Mike O'Reilly. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm great.
What's new with you since last we had you on a while back for some episodes? It's been some time.
Lots of writing.
Making some films. Actually, we're recording this from a hotel room. We are all at a film festival, the local Appleton Wildwood Film Festival, where my movie's premiering tonight. So we're taking a little break. We did some panels earlier this morning. We listened to some good speakers, and now we're taking a break and recording this episode in our hotel room. My mom has surprised us and is joining us today. Yes, Anthony.
So that's a delightful treat. And my sister, I'll let you introduce her, but my sister's with us here as well.
One of the panelists. The film festival that we're at is Wildwood Film Festival. And they have a website, wildwoodfilmfestival.com. So, yeah, your film, Volatile, is screening tonight.
Yep.
Okay, and we'll be doing that later. All right, and so then we'll move over to Kaelin O'Reilly, your sister, my cousin. Mm-hmm. You're also joining us on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How
good.
Are you?
I'm doing good. Kaelin, just to acquaint our audience with you a little bit, this is a podcast we cover science fiction, fantasy, horror. I know you're a pretty avid reader. Mm-hmm. You even did like a little book review thing on YouTube. What's your general interest in those categories of literature or films? I know like you're like a big fan of like Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah.
David Bowie.
If you grew up in the 80s, if you didn't see Labyrinth, it's kind of, you missed out.
Yeah.
On big part of childhood. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as far as the science fiction fantasy, not as much, but the horror, I like to delve into the horror now and then. So, and then there's other books that have kind of the element of fantasy or sci-fi that I like, but it's kind of more of a new thing I'm trying to acquaint myself with a little bit at a time.
Did you read Ready Player One?
Yes.
Okay, Ernest.
And that was great.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, that was a little bit unusual for me to get into, but I loved it. So kind of, I'm more open to trying new stuff. And with the Twilight Zone, I always, I really liked that. So
perfect.
Recently binge watched the whole thing on Netflix. So any stories that would have come before then, I thought it would be interesting.
Yeah.
So
cool. Also joining us is Andreas. And Andreas, what's your last name again? I already forgot. Sercovich. He told me 2 minutes ago and I already forgot. Andreas, you're a painter.
Yep.
So you do, you paint in oils. You were telling me that earlier. That's pretty cool. But what's your interest in like literature or even films and science fiction and fantasy?
I love
horror.
I love artificial intelligence and basically phenomenon of consciousness. So I really enjoyed the movie Her. That was very, very interesting. And I enjoy characters like Bishop and Aliens and Data and Star Trek.
Oh, sure. Okay. Did you see Ex Machina?
Data.
Yes, I did. I did.
Did you like that one?
Yes, it was a little more horror than I was hoping for, but it was very, very interesting, at least until the end. I like it.
Andreas, where are you from? Alabama?
Ha!
Your accent.
You can tell, I was born in Argentina, and then I went to Austria when I was 14, and then I came to the United States for college, and I stayed.
Okay, and we're lucky to have you for this. All right, that's a little bit about everyone here, so we can kind of get into the material. The book that we read, and we're kind of just focusing on 6 stories, which we'll get into one by one. But the book title is
Perchance to Dream.
And selected short stories, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Perchance a Dream selected short stories. There was a version came out by Penguin Classics in 2015. So that's what we're looking at. But the author is Charles Beaumont, who we can spend a little, few minutes here to talk about him because he was kind of an interesting guy. I'll just go into a little background and bio on him. So he was born in January 2nd, 1929. He died fairly young on February 21st, 1967. His actual birth name was Charles Nutt, N-U-T-T, but I guess he got teased about that in life, and so he changed it. And he changed it professionally and legally and personally. So he changed his name to Charles Beaumont. I think he based it off of a city in East Texas, and then I think there was also... it was like a Broadway play or something that had that name, but he adopted it fully. He was born in Chicago and raised outside there. They eventually left that area. He got sick very young and contracted spinal meningitis at 11 years old and went to convalesce in a family boarding home. And I think he took up reading then. That sparked his interest in literature. He met Ray Bradbury, which was very fortuitous, when he was like 16 years old. I think he met him in a bookstore, and they had a shared interest in comics and stuff. And, I think Bradbury told him, and this was there because there's a foreword by Bradbury in the book and an afterword by Shatner. But Bradbury told him, you should write a story like every week. And he said that Beaumont, I think, took him up on that advice and did that like the rest of his life. It was very prolific that way. Later on, that was fortuitous because I think Bradbury met Rod Serling, who was starting the Twilight Zone and was looking for writers. And so Bradbury because Bradbury in his words says that Serling didn't know what he was talking about. And so he gave him all these books of all these authors and stuff to have him educate himself on the genre of science fiction. And he turned on these writers like Richard Matheson, who we covered in a previous episode, and Beaumont. And so they were, big time writers on that show. Bradbury also had this to say. I thought this was an interesting quote. He said that Beaumont was an ideas man. His stories were very ideas related. And he said he was like watching a 4-man basketball team and you were the 5th player, often thinking if you've won the game yourself because you write your own version of the metaphor. So that was kind of his take on Beaumont's writing. He was a pretty energetic and intense guy, and some of the people's... we watched a documentary on it about the life of Charles Beaumont. I'll put a link on the episode website. But he would take impromptu trips. Like he would just call up some of his writer friends and be like, who's the writer for James Bond? Is that Ian Fleming?
Ian Fleming,
yeah. He was like, Ian Fleming's in town. Come on over and we're going to give him a tour of the historical mob sites around the city. And he would just get on a jet and fly off and go somewhere. He was interested in racing. That was one of his hobbies, and cars. What else?
Kind of seemed as if he were a adrenaline junkie in general.
Yeah, he was in the war. Well, I guess the other real significant thing is that he got sick young. He was about 33, 34 years old. And there's some, I guess, disagreement about what he actually had, but there's a consensus, and I think UCLA gave him a diagnosis of early Alzheimer's, 33, 34 years old. So by that time, he's writing for the Twilight Zone, but he can't keep up with the workload because he has this brain disease, and he's kind of slowly deteriorating, where he just can't keep up with ideas. And at some point, his friends rally around him, some other writers, and they end up ghostwriting some scripts. Although I think I saw on Wikipedia that he privately would split the fees with them so that they would get some credit and stuff like that, or they'd get paid for it. But he ends up dying at 38. And they said when he died, he looked like he was 95 years old.
Oh.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, this crazy thing. And one of the writers in the documentary was saying that Beaumont had all these headaches all the time. So he would take bromo seltzer.
Bromo seltzer.
Yeah, and apparently he would pop these pills, and there was aluminum in them. And so they were thinking that maybe he got aluminum poisoning from taking these pills to treat his headache.
That's just speculation.
It was just a speculation. But he did die. There was I don't know if you saw this on documentary, Mike, there was at one point where his son was saying where they could tell that his dad was changing because they were in the pool together, and his son, he dunked his son under the water kind of jokingly, and then didn't let him up for a while. And then when he finally let his son up, he was spaced out. He was having this Alzheimer's episode. So he had him underwater and just spaced out and didn't realize how long he had him under there. And that's when he knew the dad has this really serious condition, and they started taking him around all these places and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And then finally, they figured out it was probably this early Alzheimer's or whatever. Yeah. So those are the main things I wanted to say about him. I don't know, Mike, if you had anything else to add, or anyone else, if they had anything else to add about the author and his life. I know he did some illustration early on before he got into writing, but then he eventually left that to get into writing.
Yeah, I think he started off very, very interested in art, like you said. And I think he kind of, when he got connected with Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson and that kind of there's a couple others in there too that they kind of considered themselves like, don't they have a name for like the group?
Yeah, it was like the group or something like that. Yeah,
which is it kind of seemed like they were the 50s,
like the Rat Pack of the
50s
writers,
version of maybe like the Lost Generation with the Hemingway group, like in the 1920s.
Like the Beat Generation?
Yeah, it kind of seemed like they were that era's answer to...
They would hang out and share ideas, and I heard that they kind of consider Beaumont one of the central people in the group.
Yeah, and their wives all spent time together too, and they were friends, so it was kind of... So, yeah, nothing else to add, really, to that. I think that was well covered.
All right. Cool. And you got anyone else have anything to add?
It's interesting with Ray Bradbury. I didn't know that they knew each other until I, grabbed this book. But I've also read like a bunch of his short stories, and they kind of go along the same kind of vein of kind of the mystical, kind of out of the ordinary kind of thing. I don't remember a lot of the details of the stories, but they were like that, kind of like a mystery element to them that would have been kind of suited for Twilight Zone, I think. I don't know if Bradbury wrote anything for Twilight Zone or not. But
I think we talked about it on our episode where we covered Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes, but I think he had a falling out with Serling early on. I think, did he only maybe do like one episode?
I think he did something, and he was involved for a while.
But just
but
briefly.
I don't know exactly what.
Yeah, there was a falling out, and I think Bradbury was upset with Serling. I don't think Serling was as upset with Bradbury.
Yeah, there was some argument about, I think at some point there was some plagiarism claims on one side or the other, and I think that kind of, they had a little bit of falling. It's not known whether they reunited or they hashed things up towards the end of either's lives, which would be Serling, I think, first. But yeah, so that's unknown.
All right. Yeah, but it is interesting how these guys all knew each other and how they all got along. All right, and then, so if that's it with the bio, then we'll move on to the stories. All right, so then let's get right into them. So I'll just go to the stories. I think I'm doing it in publication order. It doesn't really matter. But the first story we'll cover is Perchance to Dream. That came out in 1952. It was published in If magazine. So that story was about a young woman who wishes that she does not want an imperfect body.
No.
She lives in a world...
Oh, that's beautiful, people.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing these out of order. So we'll do The Beautiful People first, which came out in 1952 in If magazine. So it was about a young woman who doesn't want an imperfect body. Her body is... she's being told that she needs to transform her body to become a perfect body to fit into this future society. Everyone wants her to do this, including her own mother, and she's kind of against it. And that's essentially what the story's about. Some of the things that happen in this is it seems like the whole world has kind of changed. People aren't sleeping. Eating has changed. People who don't want to be transformed are kind of considered mutant. Her mom is very upset with her that she won't. But I think overall with the story, it's about kind of suppressing individuality and making everyone fit in.
Conforming it.
Yeah, they're suppressing independent thoughts and stuff like that. Like, what did you guys think about it? Let's go to Andreas first. Your thoughts on that story, and it feels very relevant now. I think even now people worry about becoming just like clones, of society.
Oh yeah, everybody was kind of cloned. There were just a few models, and you picked your model. You could be Rick or somebody else, and you look like 1/6 of the population. I think it was interesting.
I mean, you're an artist, so you're always doing paintings and stuff like that. I wonder how that would speak to you from an artistic perspective of like trying to express yourself. I mean, that's what you're doing with your art.
That's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Because in the art, you want to capture something, and it's unique. And I personally enjoy seeing the accidents, and I enjoy seeing the particular features of how the paint dries, or the colors, and the fact that you can't really paint exactly the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Especially if you do you portraits at all? Just like this, just different facial features that would be unique to different people. And like, imagine doing that when
Everyone looks the same.
Everyone looks the same. Yeah, you just end up making copies of the same thing over and over.
Yeah, and I find reading that book, I was thinking about what is the redeeming value here. There was a case built on books. She lists a number of authors, and how she uses that to support some not fully articulated point of view that her uniqueness is important to her and that she defends almost to the end. But basically, I don't know. I was trying to understand what that point was. I guess
I feel like the point was her bringing the books up was to say these authors were valued individuality. And she was like, look, this is what we need to do. We need to express ourselves this way, but society had moved past that.
Because it wasn't just the making everyone look and appear the same. They were taking away their minds and their personalities in an effort to really control. And I think she was realizing that, and everyone else thought, oh, I'm going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to look good and I'm going to have no problems anymore. But it was really like kind of
it was more than just,
more conspiracy type of thing. Maybe that's the wrong word, but to make everyone conform to this, model.
I think
with taking their minds and their selves away from them.
Yeah, and in so doing, maybe the horror bit is affected. As you are incorporated into this society, you sort of disappear, which is a horrific.
That's the line that I think Bradbury brings up in the foreword. He said, "What will happen to me?" That's what she says.
Yeah,
they're going to change her outward appearance, but she's worried about her inside disappearing as well.
Right.
She said, "Where will I find me? What will happen to me?"
Yeah.
And where's Mary? Like, her name is Mary, so she's like, where's Mary? And they're all just like, you're foolish, everything's gonna be fine. Yeah.
You bring up the horror, Andres. One particularly disturbing part, and I'll talk to you, Mike, about this, is that her mom, I think her mom talks about like petitioning to force her to get this alteration. Like, they kind of say it's like voluntary, but they're like, if you don't, then we're going to petition you to do it. And the mom goes to the extent of like calling her employer and telling her employer that she's not going to change her appearance to fit in, so that the employer is like kind of threatening to fire her because she'll be a freak
in a passive aggressive way.
I mean, it's very disturbing, because it's not like they're just going to snatch her off the street and like force her into surgery. But I mean, it kind of is like that.
Well, they make it seem voluntary, but everyone else wants to do it because everyone's kind of almost brainwashed into thinking if you're this certain ideal, like this physical ideal, all your problems are going away, and everyone should do the same thing. And,
otherwise you're the problem.
Exactly.
And also it's a soft way for this absorbing of the individual into the whole to creep up, which is also an element of horror, maybe. Generation after generation, this may become more and more pervasive. Her dad fought it and lost, and that's perhaps another reason. It's like you can't escape it. It's like a boa constrictor, maybe. Just curls around you slowly, and then that's it.
Yeah. The familiar pressure is particularly disturbing, I thought. And Mike, you're a parent. You have a son. I mean, that's like, when you're raising a kid, I would imagine you have to balance, like, you want your child to be individual, but you also want to have an impression on them and mold them somewhat.
This story, I don't know, this story was, to me, it was pure horror.
Yeah.
Because, we all our childhoods were a lot different than, kids coming up now, where there's so many outside influences coming in, and everything, the whole world is right at your fingertips now, to where your children are exposed to anything and everything under the sun. And there's, social media apps that are available right at your fingertips, that where, you have Instagram out there, which can be a great tool for people, but it can also be something that, people just use to broadcast, to show their superficialities. There are entire Instagram accounts, millions of them, that are women just showing their butts. And their selfies, and it's just pure superficiality, and it's a very superficial society.
Well, people have been saying that for a long time. Right? Look at this story, right?
Right.
How long ago this kid?
But it's relevant. It's still horror.
Yeah.
To me, it's horror. It's horror.
It is also when you look. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. But when you look at that, you also you can see that in yourself too. Like, everyone's got their own insecurities or whatever, whether bodily or whatever. And I was looking at, when I was watching the episode, I mean, we'll talk about the episode later, but just showing the different models, like the prototypes of who you could look like. And I was thinking, which one would I want to pick? I mean, she has like these nice facial features, but she's taller and stuff. And I was like thinking, which one would I want to pick? And then it's like, well,
you're buying right into it.
Yeah, exactly. I admit it. But
you are actively partaking.
But that's how they did it. Like, because people take advantage of people, wanting to have a certain ideal.
Yes,
like physical ideal. Because I think it's part of human nature to want to and then fit in. So everyone's going to look the same. So they're all going to conform.
Andres?
It's like the dichotomy, the tension between the know yourself and, knowing what you love and knowing what you need in life and what you don't need versus the concept of anybody left alone long enough go insane, like anybody in solitary, because given our nature, we're social creatures, no? And how you reconcile both. And this is gentle tension. And even though perhaps we're more individualistic, I paint, he makes movies, and
Kaelin reads books.
Thank you. But we can also sort of hear the other side, understand the other side. I also wonder, who would I be? Would I be Rick? I don't like Rick myself. But yeah, it's a nice tension.
It is, because to a certain extent, all of us want to fit in some way because we want to feel connection with people. But at one point, does the individuality, merge into the society, and it's like there's always a tension there.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
No clear line.
All right, we could probably move on to the next story. Unless you guys anything else about that, we'll kind of revisit it when we get to the show. All right, the second story we'll cover is The Jungle, which came out in 1954 from If magazine. So this story is about a character who's after having uprooted and destroyed a section of African jungle to make way for a modernized civilization, a man seeks to confront a shaman regarding a terrible illness which has befell his wife. The shaman bids him one last time to remove this city that they're putting out there and warns him that ancient magics will have their way in the end if he does not. And of course, he doesn't heed the shaman and bad things happen. We can get to the ending eventually, but this story is obviously ripe with themes of colonialism. It's kind of something in the world now in literature. I go to writing conventions, people talk about, colonialism in literature and stuff like that and the effect that has in society. You have these people just putting their society into another society. And this story is interesting because the jungle actually creeps back in. It starts, creeping back into the story. But, well, let's go to you, Mike. Do you have any initial thoughts? Did you like this story?
I did. I liked this story. It was probably one of my favorites. It did a very good job of keeping tension, the first line to the last line. I think it was very easy to visualize this world that this man had created. Basically, it was a city, an entire city that he was responsible for building.
Yeah, right in the middle of the jungle, right? They cleared it out.
They leveled a jungle and an entire civilization that had been there prior to him arriving there. And I think, I think
this was in Kenya. It was set. The natives were the Bantu people, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, and I think the industrialization theme was palpable. That was clearly the point Beaumont was trying to get across about we are going to industrialize at all costs.
Yeah.
At any cost.
It's one thing that I thought was interesting is so the main character, his wife is sick, and he does think to go to talk to the shaman to see if there can be help for this, and the shaman, I think, gives him the warning, hey, get rid of this city. That's the problem. You don't understand. There's ancient magic here that you don't understand. If you don't do that, something bad's going to happen. He I guess he believes him enough to go to him, but then he disregards it. And at one point, he's running back to where he lives, and he gets lost in the city. And it was almost like the city was like the jungle over again.
I think we need to point out that the entire city's population has been wiped out. Yeah. Right? Was that not in the story?
Or they're just kicked out of the area.
I think so, yeah. Or they were...
No, they have all died from some disease.
And there's a plague or something going around.
So this city is basically abandoned by now, and they're
going to bring in people to live there.
They're going to bring in people from
the outside,
from some
Europe or something,
westernized nation.
Yeah.
So the isolation, the main character is severely isolated.
Yeah, he's like running around this modernized city that there isn't really
big, empty concrete jungle.
It's going to be a big cash cow for them. He's imagining all the money they're going to make when this all gets up and running. Yeah.
So he gets to the shaman to talk to him about it, and I guess the shaman brings up how you have your so-called civilization. You thought we were uncivilized people, and that was wrong. And then how they thought they were ignorant savages.
Yeah.
And they were trying to civilize them, but it didn't. He said, did it not occur to you that we too had our culture and our social structure, that we knew right and wrong, that perhaps we might look upon you as backward and uncivilized?
Yeah, that's the colonialization where they're saying, like, the outsider is coming in and saying, we're making it better for you. And the shaman is telling him, no, you're just making it different. We had our own cultural norms and ways that we handled things, and you're just doing it differently.
We didn't need you to do that for us. And then, of course, the guy is Austin or whatever is all about pushing his own modernization or whatever and onto them without really realizing the other culture. And
Andres, the ending of the story. So the character doesn't heed the shaman's advice. And he goes back, and what he discovers is the jungle has come back, and it's come back to, is he like in a hotel room or something like that where he's living? A condo?
His apartment.
Yeah, his apartment.
He goes to his apartment.
And he finds, now he's been hearing drums, we should say. The whole time he's been hearing drums going on around him, like a classical kind of like symbology to hint that the jungle's out there, the wild is still out there. So he runs back home, and he goes in and he opens a door, and he sees there's a lion that has devoured his wife or is eating his wife. Like, how did that ending strike you?
Well, I see this as an instance where the colonized people had a mechanism to basically obliterate the colonizer, which is kind of opposite to historical experience, other than perhaps guerrilla warfare or something. So it was kind of, the whole story sort of goes in that same direction, and the lion eating his wife, and maybe him too, is kind of like the climax of this downsloping misadventure for this character. But it's interesting to see the parallels, how the shaman casts the colonizers as perhaps being more retrograde in some way. But other than that, it looks pretty linearly like an instance of colonization. And what makes it interesting is that the colonized people win. And you mentioned the drums. It's like an omnipresence that is just there. And if you remember, there's also a sound of machines running that kept the place going, that kind of dies off, and sort of where the drums win out. So it's like, the colonized people fighting back and winning in a pretty overwhelming way.
It's kind of, I thought it was kind of nature winning too, as well, just nature in general, because they're trying to wipe out the jungle and therefore wiping out the habitat and wildlife or whatever. So then that was kind of showing, well, we're still here, we're still here, and we're going to win. We're going to beat you for what you're doing, and you're not going to succeed in this because you're trying to eradicate something that shouldn't be eradicated.
It doesn't fit in here.
Right.
Yeah, it's like underscoring the foolishness of the objectives of engineers and civilized society trying to plan and manipulate the environment, and basically Mother Nature being an all-powerful force that basically will teach you a lesson.
You guys are so articulate. I stumble on every single word I ever say. I can't even speak. Well put, both of you.
I was worried about saying 2 words.
Cool. Anyone else have any other thoughts on this story, or we move on to the next one?
No.
Okay. All right. So the third story we'll cover came out in 1957 in Imagination magazine. It was called The Man Who Made Himself. It was also called In His Image. So this one is about the main character discovers he's really an exact robotic replica of his creator. And after going nearly insane from messed up memories, he confronts his creator. So it's almost like a Frankenstein kind of story if you think about it. It felt a little typical of these kind of stories and stuff. It was very interesting because you are in the main character's head. he's like, it starts off with he's engaged with this girl he just met, and he's like, all right, we're going to go back to my hometown and we're going to get married. And they go back there, and all of a sudden, like, he has all these memories he's been telling her about, and they go to each of these places, like his old high school and stuff, and like they're either not there or the people are not there, and people don't remember him, and he's like, what the heck's going on? And then the crazy twist, which was pretty unique, I thought, is that, oh, you know, he's the duplicate. He's the robot. The protagonist is the robot. It's not the other way around like you'd expect. And he ends up, he confronts his creator, who he looks exactly like. And then the guy's like, yeah, I made you to make the perfect man. The creator tells him, because there's an episode before he confronts the creator where he's with his fiance, and he's losing his mind, and he picks up a rock and he thinks about, like, I think bashing her head in because of how insane he's going. And when he confronts the creator about this, the creator's like, well, he says something like, I made you and you have all my qualities, including my bad qualities, but they're like amped up or whatever. So there's some kind of thing in there that I don't know that I quite fully understand, where it's like,
he made him without, like, his inhibitions that he would normally have, because he said, you know, everyone thinks about, you know, doing something bad every now and then. You may think, like, oh, I want to kill this person, but I never actually do it. I have inhibitions.
Right.
He wanted to make a character, like, replica of himself, but without, that didn't have fears or whatever, that didn't have, you know, would do everything he was afraid to do in his own life.
And this was the downside to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently so.
But the creator, the human, has a problem. He's flawed as well. Maybe he has the inhibitions where he won't go try to kill people, but there's something in him where he needed to create a robot to be more human. There's that part of the story, because the ending of the story is that he goes, the robot tells him, is basically like, can I be fixed? And the creator's like, no, you're going to always be like this. You're always going to potentially, like, be murderous. And so the robot's like, okay, here's what we're going to do is you're going to take over the life I started for you, and you're going to marry this girl and give her a good life. And that ending is so kind of crazy, because he goes on, like, that's how it ends. I mean, Andreas, like, what are your thoughts about this one, about the ending or any part of it?
I think what was very interesting to me, because I love artificial intelligence and the phenomenon of consciousness, of what are we inside our skulls, is how this whole topic was approached. Basically, you start reading about what you think is a human character, and then they give you little hints here and there that something is off in his mind. And then it ends up with when he opens his arm in an accident, and he can see some mechanical wirings.
That was so creepy. Like
Well, but that was the full stop to the sentence. You are a cyborg. You're not human. Yeah. And I found that very interesting. Trying to understand, you know, what elements were there to make us think and interpret this character as human. Right? Yeah. What's the necessary and sufficient conditions to have a human mind and a human perception of the world, no? And then as time goes on, you see that unravel, and you see more and more problems that this character encounters, to the extent that he almost murders his fiancée, which I would have thought a robot would have more control than the human counterpart, no?
Well, it's interesting how since we're reading the protagonist, we automatically assume he's human. And then it slowly gets revealed to us. And I feel like, I mean, there's some cheesy lines in here that I had in my notes where he's like, the protagonist tells the fiance he works in computers, you know, even though he actually never did, because these were all memories implanted in his mind. Yeah. And he is a computer. And then his fiance asks him about, like, old, like, flings and stuff like that. And he tells her that among sparking circles, the ladies knew him as the human electrode. I mean, real cheesy lines like that, but there actually ends up being, like, clues that later that he is a freaking robot.
Like symbolism.
Yeah. I don't know. I still feel like there's something there where there's some depth to this story where he, you know, it's called In His Image, which is like a biblical kind of reference. And what is the author really getting at? Like, that the fact that this guy's life wouldn't be complete unless he created this robot with murderous tendencies who showed him the way. Right? Because I think, didn't the character describe himself as a perfectionist? And he was not really like a good human being. He created this robot. And then he ends up having a better life because the robot shows him how to live.
Yeah. Like a controlled experiment.
Yeah.
Basically, the life of a human involves a certain degree of compromise. And so he created his alter ego. Like, what if all my passions were in this being that I'm creating and none of the compromises, you know? Which sounds inherently interesting. And turns out that was an unstable experiment.
Yeah.
It held together for a while. I mean, he didn't last more than a week, right?
Yeah.
Before he went totally insane and tried to kill his fiancée.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think, we're in 2018, we're kind of jaded as readers and viewers of in general.
Yeah, like we've seen Terminator.
We've seen all this 1,000 times before, but when this was written and when people were reading this for the first time, you wonder if the readers had the same suspicions. Mm-hmm. Did they tune into those little cues? These little hints that, gee, maybe this character is not actually human. Us as readers right now, of course, it's the first place we go because we assume, well, wait a minute, you can't fool us now, but I don't think that should take anything away from the original work.
I didn't realize he was. I mean, maybe I'm just.
I don't think I'd realized it right away.
I didn't know he was a robot. I mean.
Yeah, and I think I had a little hint or a little.
Well, you usually assume people are cyborgs. You've told me that privately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shape-shifting reptilians.
Most of the population. Yeah. Slowly, each of us become cyborg.
Yeah. I mean, these stories all have like twist endings and stuff, but I mean...
I'm a cybernetic organism.
But there's a depth to them that speaks to humanity that's more than just about the trick ending. Like, oh, I was a robot all along. There's something there that explores humanity. Like I still keep going back to this tension that
living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
You're freakish good at that, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. In this story,
get down,
get in the chopper. sorry. Arnold got us again.
All done.
But,
go ahead, Andre.
It seems like I don't know. Maybe I don't know if this was from the 50s or 60s. There's this implicit belief that the humanity, the natural, is superior or wiser in some respect. And so, I mean, who gets the girl in the end? Is it the cyborg or is it the man?
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, the human gets the
human.
Right. I mean, they both have this tendencies, including homicidal tendencies, right? But who keeps their shit together? It's the human, no?
Yeah, the human triumphs. But yet the robot had to show him how to live. I still keep going back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good...
Because he was basically not living a great life. He was like living an obsessive lifestyle until the robot's like, what did you do? What did you create?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but he was like, the robot was like an experiment, like a mouse. Right. Yeah. And that was sacrificed in the end.
I think this theme, this basic theme in this story was probably the most complex or the most open for any kind of interpretation as far as any of the stories we read. I think it's the most, there's a lot more going on and you can kind of create it.
I feel like I read a quote from Bradbury or maybe he said something that Beaumont wrote another story, and I don't think it was in this collection, where a guy, or this was like an idea he just like came up and he wanted to explore, where a guy goes back in time to meet his father or his grandfather and then kills him and then wants to see like what'll happen to me. If I went back in time and killed my dad as a youth.
You just fade away like in Back to the Future.
I was thinking that Back to the Future picture fades away. Yeah. I no longer
exist. You'd expect that.
Yeah, and I think
you would now because we've all seen Back to the Future, but
back then,
if they had actually made that would have been a really interesting story.
Well, I think he wrote the story.
Did he?
I think so. I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, it's kind of like a similar theme. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anyone else have any thoughts on this story? No. Okay. I'll move on to the fourth one. The fourth story is Perchance to Dream. Finally. That one came out in 1998, and it came out in Playboy magazine. And Playboy magazine, I think, published, was it the first story that Beaumont wrote?
His first,
story called Black Country. And it was actually the first short story that Playboy magazine published, I believe. It was like one of their first stories. So this one was about a man who has a heart condition. He has a heart condition and fears to fall asleep because he feels like his mind is making him perceive his dreams as real, and then he'll die. So he goes in to see a psychiatrist about this. And, basically the dream is, he dreams in serial. So he has a dream and then like it advances. He sees a woman who is trying to get him to ride a roller coaster, I believe. And he doesn't want to because he knows it'll upset his heart. He's taking Dexedrine or something like that.
Dexedrine, yeah.
in the dream, the woman's like, come and go on this roller coaster with me. And he doesn't want to because he knows if he does, his heart will go crazy and then he'll die. So he's like, I have to stay awake or whatever. And it gets all crazy because the psychiatrist's secretary looks like the woman from his dream. I forget how it ends. It ends with him. You find out he was dead within like a minute of him being there. He came in and laid down, and the whole thing is like a dream. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. It was at the end. Basically, they reconciled the hypothesis of him experiencing his dreams and this woman that is trying to kill him one dream at a time, getting closer to his death, and it only being a dream. Because in the end, he dies within his dream.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he dies when he first comes in, just closes his eyes, and all his conversations with the psychiatrist were part of his dream. But in reality, he just laid down and died of his heart condition.
Yeah.
And so both stories, even though they were competing, they were crafted into an ambiguous timeline, ambiguous situation. And with his death, they sort of come together like a fulcrum.
Was this then? I was a little confused about the story and what it overall was trying to get at. Was it him trying to face his death, and this woman is representing death? Was she wearing white or something like an obvious symbol for death? And so she keeps appearing, reminding him he's going to die eventually because he's got this condition, and he's trying to avoid it. So going to sleep would make her appear.
Well, the thing is, he knew that the next dream he would die. So he would just have to dream for just a second or so and he would die. Because first dream he meets this woman, second dream he gets on the roller coaster with her, and he understands that this isn't bad shit. This woman's bad news.
Yeah, he dreams in serial. He describes them as like radio dramas. He mentions Hermit's Cave or something.
Yeah, he made a reference to old time radio.
Yeah.
Ryan, you may disagree with me on this one, but I saw this story as pure yarn escapism. I didn't see it as any allegory or any, McCarthyism undertones or capitalism undertones or,
What about futility?
Sure.
Well, that's the horror of it, because you can't. I mean, if you could like shoot the big bad monster, you shoot him,
and the big bad monster is like, I can't go to sleep, but then he goes to sleep no matter what, and he's got the heart condition, and is it like you guys are saying, like, is it like you have to just make peace with how things are, and all your worry will amount to nothing?
I don't think about it that much. Don't get me wrong. When I say escapism and yarn, I mean that as complimentary towards the writer, because I loved it. I loved the story. I thought it was fantastic. And I loved that it was, and you hate the term escapism. I love the term escapism.
What do you mean in this context?
Well, I mean,
with escapism?
I just don't like when people say escapism, like there isn't a lot of value to, like, that. Sometimes I think people use the term escapism and they mean it that, like, the art is shallow and there isn't depth to it, and there can't be like truths and stuff to it. But the escapism is fine.
Like reading a Twilight novel or a 50 Shades.
Okay.
Just escape.
Yeah.
What I reality.
Mean, what I mean in escapism is I mean a little more E.T. than Transformers. They're both kind of can be
something can have escapism elements, like, I mean, and also have depth. I mean, like, I think Lord of the Rings has escapism elements, but it's also got a lot of other stuff going on.
I didn't want you to think that I meant, this is just a popcorn book.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't know.
But at the same time, this is horror, right? So it's got to be a showcase of horror, and it's not horror if you can swat it dead. So if it can actually be like, say, creeps up and you can't stop it and you see it coming slowly, and that's horror. Or you kill it and say, I'm okay now. And all of a sudden you realize that the reality is not that. Actually, you're even more screwed.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the story. But I mean, this is like by definition a showcase of horror.
Is this like a tragedy?
Something horrific happening? Probably tragedy.
Like, because it is actually, the title is Perchance to Dream, which is it's from Hamlet. It's from Shakespeare's Hamlet. His famous speech, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream.
Yeah.
There's the rub. So, I mean, and that's one of Shakespeare's tragedies. So is he playing off that? I don't know.
Well, it certainly is a tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You feel for the guy.
Like, it's like the story is over as soon as it starts. What you realize at the end. Like, he was already dead.
All I can say is it would have made a fantastic short film, and I wish I had been the one that acted.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So then the woman, I mean, is she meant to represent something, or is that too easy to say that she's like,
I don't know. I can see that.
I feel like that's overdone, like having the woman like reappearing, and I don't remember if she was.
You got to look at it in the proper context, though.
I know, but I mean, she seemed to symbolize that he was close to death, and she'd show up, and he was trying to run away from her and avoid her.
Was she not there when he entered the psychiatrist's office? Because
she said she saw him 2 minutes. This is in the book. She said I saw him 2 minutes ago. Okay, so she must have checked him in.
Well, that's what my question is. Was she not there when he checked in? Because otherwise
he would have recognized her,
and freaked out immediately.
That's what I thought too. That's what I thought too.
Yeah. Because actually, he mentions the woman in his dream after he entered the psychiatrist's office.
Right.
That means that he incorporated the picture of the secretary into this whole narrative in his dream.
If he saw her.
So even the beginning, the previous episodes, right, when they were not so close to death, even before the roller coaster, might have happened after, right?
Yeah.
Timeline.
It was like Inception before Inception.
Yes.
I wrote down that she was kind of creepy. Like the stuff she said to him was like, "We've been expecting you, Mr. Hall, and come on, darling," she said, "we haven't much time, and don't you know?" Like, I don't know, I just felt like all the things that she said either in his dream or whatever were just kind of like classic kind of creepy lines. "We've been expecting you."
She was the agent of doom. I mean, it's like I keep saying, it could be a monster or a cybernetic organism or something like that. It's just a woman this time.
What was didn't he incorporate the picture? Wasn't there a picture like a boat on the wall? Or is that what he uses to describe his dream?
That's the beginning, no?
Yeah.
When he says that he can make things move in the picture.
Oh, yeah. He said he can make things move in the picture.
He mentioned it. He mentioned when he was a kid, he could stare at a picture long enough, and then the things would start to move. And, like a train going over a cliff or something like that, or a horse carriage.
Yeah.
If you stared at it long enough, and I think his uncle or his grandfather told him that, and he realized he could do that. And then, I wasn't sure how that tied in.
That somehow tied into his dreams. And then like that his dreams could affect him in reality or something like that. That's how it got into the dreams.
Okay.
But all right, we can probably move on to the fifth one now. All right. The fifth story is The Howling Man. That one came out in 1959. Yeah, in Rogue magazine. So the synopsis of this one is: there's a wealthy young Bostonian man who's on sabbatical in Germany. He's rescued by some monks from a life-threatening bout of pneumonia, and while he's convalescing in their abbey, he discovers that they have imprisoned a malnourished man they claim is the devil, but who denies this accusation and begs to be let out. And so the story centers around this guy hearing this man screaming or howling, "Let me out, let me out," and the protagonist debating on whether or not he should let him out. So this is a very, very popular story. I don't remember if it was one of the longer ones, but I felt like it had a lot of depth to it. Mm-hmm. Or Mike, you're really into this story? Do you have some initial thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think as far as length, it was one of the longer ones, because I think he kind of goes into a little more backstory with the main character, I feel, than stories.
Yeah, he does.
Whereas they just start from the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
In a more linear way, where this one kind of, the character has an inner monologue kind of that goes into detail about his privileged upbringing and his wanderings through Europe. And he's kind of trying to find himself, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. And then they go into background with the Howling Man, so what happens is he finally meets this guy who's screaming in prison, let me out, and the prisoner says these monks or these brothers, they wrongly imprisoned him because they saw him like kissing a woman and they didn't approve of his actions, and they're so like, you're inappropriate, so we're locking you up.
Well, it's they
that's what the prisoner said.
Right. And the character has a bad case of pneumonia, and he is
kind of like getting feverish.
He's febrile. He's having hallucinations. It's tough for him to interpret if he's hallucinating or not. And the monks flat out and deny that he's hearing these wailings, these howlings.
Yeah.
So that automatically leads him to believe that they're lying. So he doesn't trust them.
They sort of, I think that's
immediately
the unreliable narrator thing.
Well, no, I think it's I think that is that gaslighting, where you make someone think that they're going crazy, that what they're perceiving is not real. That's what they're doing to him. He's hearing these screamings, and they're like, "No, we don't hear a man
There's
screaming.
nobody there." Yeah.
Yeah.
But he sticks to it, and
Yeah.
And he even mentions at one point in the story that because he's been getting to know this monk who's kind of been nursing him as he's feeling better, he gets to know this monk to the point where he can pick up on his cues when he's lying. At one point, the character said, "I can tell he never wants to look at me directly when we bring up this topic." Didn't he say something like,
honest men
something about
suck
that.
at lying, something like
Body
that.
language.
Yeah. So
I thought he just used that. He just said that line as a ploy to try to get them to admit it.
no, I think that was narration. That was his inner monologue. So that
But that's a creepy aspect of the story. Is I felt like at some point you're kind of wondering, is he trapped there? Are the monks going to end up keeping him there?
Yeah, I wonder that too.
Right.
It doesn't go that way, but there's that kind of ominous
wonder.
threat.
Yeah, you wonder about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found this story to be pretty basic compared to the others, in that the whole thing is, it's pretty binary. Either there's the element of confusion due to the illness and perhaps hallucinations. Am I hallucinating the howls that I hear? Are the monks hearing it and not telling me? Mm-hmm. But that's just to confound which of the distinct two cases is true. Whether the devil is there or the monks are insane, and abusive.
I agree with
that. Or he is insane.
Yeah.
Well, or he, right. But
I guess that's the big picture.
Yeah.
Right, that just obscures the line between the two for a pretty long time, right? The whole illness episode, and then is this monk lying? I can tell his cues, and then he lies to Father Jerome or Brother Jerome.
Yeah.
This is like a fog, I think, to like hide the middle line between the two possible cases. But once you know it's the devil, it's a pretty straightforward.
Right. There's not.
That's a good question. But at some point, he confronts. There's two brothers. There's the one who like kind of keeping watch of him. I think that's
Brother Christophorus.
And then Brother Jerome, who's like in charge. And so he finally confronts Jerome and is like, "I hear this." And then they admit, yeah, there is someone screaming. I think they get around their lie because they're saying he's not a man.
He's no man. There's no. Right. You hear no man.
Yeah, it's the devil.
He admits to it, and he starts telling him, "What did you notice? Like the town or the city that we're in has been a lot more peaceful. Like there's not like crimes going around. There are natural disasters or people die from disease, but that's not. There's no like human." Crimes or
those were the
like
normal sufferings that humanity was supposed to endure.
Yeah, normal sufferings, but not related to like the evilness of man. And that's why, and we have him locked up, and as long as he's locked up, then people are safe from that.
But, the words of the Big Lebowski, that's like your opinion, man, because, you think everything's more chill now, but, that's what you think. And obviously, the main character didn't buy it because he totally busted the devil out of jail.
Right. And they said that the doubt is the devil's biggest tool. So he doesn't believe Father Jerome, whatever, and he goes and he lets the devil out, and then the devil's like, "All right, let's go, let's escape." And then I think what happens is they flee the monastery, and then he trips or something like that, and he needs help, and then the devil's like, "Well, see ya."
Yeah,
the devil disappears. Yeah.
Then do we get to me? I was like, so does that confirm that he was the devil? Because what happens is then he leaves them, the devil ditches them. Then the police come, I think, right? And the brothers, and he tells the police that they had someone falsely in prison, and the brothers are just like, "No, he's delusional." So the brothers don't get in trouble. And then something causes him to believe that he was wrong. I can't remember. Did something mystical happen?
Yeah, because he's like, "I'm sorry." And then he's like, "That's what the devil will do to you. He'll deceive you." And so he was like, "It's okay."
Didn't this took place right in between World War I and World War II?
Yeah, there's definitely, World War II comes into it.
Well, ultimately, I think he leaves there, and then the war breaks out,
right?
And then he is struck with this thought that, did I let the devil out and cause all this? And then the way the story actually wraps up is he gets a postcard from one of the brothers saying, "Hey, don't worry about it. We caught him again. There's going to be peace." And I kind of felt like the story was kind of like he wasn't certain when he left the monastery that he let the devil out. But he was, when he released the devil, he was sure that it was a human. They were falsely in prison. And then when the devil ditched him, he was like, "Oh, was it a devil or not?" And he kind of was like left with this doubt, and then these wars happened.
And then World War II came out.
And he's more suspicious.
Everything that went with
and this happened in Germany, too.
Yeah.
Yes, it happened in Germany, too.
Yeah.
I thought that was a pretty profound thing in the sense that, like, can you imagine being that character and having that weight on your conscience your whole life? Like, what did I do? You know, but then they let him off the hook in the end by giving a postcard saying we got him again.
Yeah, but he had didn't he set out to locate him? Did he mention that?
Well, I think that's what happens in the show.
It's like
I thought it happened in the book too, but I might be blending the two.
Yeah, I mean, brother Jerome, he just saves the day, forgives him, sends him a nice postcard saying everything's cool.
Hey, you unleashed the devil on the world. That's all good, brah.
Got him. He's back in here.
He started having dreams.
We'll handle it.
He started having dreams about the world and like invasion of Poland and all the world. It's like said the world was plunged into war and cities and blown asunder, and it was a place of hate and death. He dreamed every night. So he was, I think, basically tormented by all the crap that had gone wrong. And then he receives the card from Germany.
And everything's been great since.
From brother Christophorus, saying that they caught him again. They caught him again.
But that almost, like, if he was still unsure when he left Germany, if it was a devil for sure, and then the wars happened, he's still debating in his mind, did I cause that, did I not? Was it real or not? But then when he gets this postcard, it's almost like, oh, yeah, I did make that huge mistake.
Yeah, like a continuation of the fog, because he did not see the devil. He just saw that the dude he just freed sort of walked away. So there's no confirmation one way or the other.
Right.
And so he was tortured by that uncertainty.
Yes, it's a lot more uncertain. The fog continues. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So once it's like this linchpin of that uncertainty, which ends when Jerome sends him that postcard, right? Mm-hmm. So without that, you take that away, and it's like a linear narrative, at least in my opinion, you know, of which scenario was the true one. And it's just fantasy.
Of course, you could still doubt the veracity of the postcard, right? You could still say, well,
I guess you could.
You could still say, oh, well, that's just a brother's opinion.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big thing is his uncertainty. He goes back and forth. Like, if the pneumonia breeds delirium breeds visions. Was it possible I had imagined the whole thing?
Yeah.
And so he's kind of like, the monks were mad, or the Howling Man was mad, or the whole thing was a joke, but...
He kind of doubts through to the end.
Yeah, he's going on it, like, back and forth.
Well, it is the ambiguity that can bring horror or what you could call the Twilight Zone into reality. Otherwise, it cannot be admitted into reality. There's got to be some ambiguous element that can host that magical or that horror that is also coherent with reality.
Yeah. Well, and if you're still not certain, is it the devil or is it not? It's like worse than if you knew it was the devil. Because if you knew for certain it was the devil, then like you could go and do something about it. But if you're still like, well, I don't know, do I kill this person because I think they're the devil? What if they're not the devil?
Yeah.
And at that point, he doesn't know where he went. So
tough spot.
Yeah.
But the last line really was like, ooh, like I loved reading the last line because I kind of figured, and I don't know if I figured right, but does that mean they caught Hitler? Or, because I mean, it wasn't like that really happened.
They allude to it pretty heavily.
But yeah.
It seems. Because Hitler did disappear, right? They never really found his body.
They said that it was a carpenter from Braunau am Inn. I'm not pronouncing it right, which was the birthplace of Adolf Hitler in Austria. And I don't know why they said a carpenter, because a carpenter was like Jesus's profession, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Do they have Jesus in there now?
The fog continues.
Yeah.
Beyond the end of the story.
Jesus put my
heart. A little
right.
ambiguous.
Okay, all right. I think we covered that one. Let's move on to the last story. We're going to cover the sixth one. This one is called A Song for a Lady. It came out in March 1960. I think it came out in Night Ride and Other Journeys. So this one, it's about a couple that books their honeymoon on a final voyage of a rotting old ocean liner heading to England. Upon arrival at the ship, they're rebuffed by a pair of older passengers for unknown reasons, only to discover later that the ship is full exclusively with former passengers and the original crew who had all once been honeymooners aboard the ship. The initial awkwardness is smoothed over, and things go swimmingly until they are just about to reach their destination when the old passengers and crew force them off the boat in the middle of the ocean and abandon them. Andres, you told me you particularly liked this story. You said it was like, heartwarming.
Yeah, especially when I compared it to Twilight Zone episode, which I saw the characters come together. We'll talk about that in their own right with their proper British accents and everything else.
But you were talking about ambiguity in the last one. I felt like this story also had a lot of ambiguity where you have these old guys confronting this young couple, kind of trying to throw money at them literally to not come on the boat. So clearly you're worried something bad's going to happen on this boat. And then they're saying weird things to them, and there's every once in a while then it gets smoothed over, and you keep waiting for this, like there's like this subtle menace that's kind of building and then subsiding. Like you think something bad's going to happen, and then all of a sudden like they're accepted by the passengers, and they're like, oh, you know, they hear all their life stories and they go dancing and they have this nice romantic time, and then all of a sudden the menace comes back that you forgot about.
Yeah, I think there's from the beginning a palpable finality to this story. It was the Lady Anne's last voyage. Also, everybody there is old.
Yeah, they're the only young couple.
Right.
Period.
Literally.
They're so, and the thing is, that is the finality of it, and perhaps the meat of it is love. No, and an environment in which love can flourish, which is having time at sea, not having any routines.
Well, and some of the people are even widowers, I think, on the ship.
Precisely. That's like it's the finality had already commenced. There were 3 men whose wives had died.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unusual, right? We die first.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Was the history then, if I remember, all of these older couples had been on the ship for like honeymoons or for in their early days with their spouses. Right. So they had a history with this ship.
Yeah, everyone had a relationship with
this boat. So they all
boat.
came back for a last voyage. So it was very meaningful. And then when the young couple shows up, they, it's clear that there's something, like they don't fit in there.
Well, they're alien. Everyone alienates the young couple.
At first.
Basically, they don't really look at them.
They give them strange looks, and they're made to feel very out of place.
Right.
The young couple.
That's that kind of subtle menace. And then it subsides because then they decide, well, they're on the boat with us, and they kind of accept them, and they share why this boat was so special, because they all had their honeymoons there, and they all had this magical experience. And in the end, what happens is they purposely, I think, sink the ship. Right? There's like an explosion goes on. So they forced the couple off at gunpoint, like in the middle of a party. They're having like this big dance, and everyone's having a good time. And all of a sudden they're like, all right, dance is over. Here, they pull out guns, and they're like, you have to get off the ship. We're leaving you in the ocean. But they tell them they're leaving them with supplies, and I think they tell them they radioed help.
Yeah.
But they don't explain what's going on. They're just like, you're off now. And the couple gets put in the sea. And then as the couple watches, the boat pulls away, and then there's an explosion, and then the boat sinks. And they realize like these old people, the boat was going to be retired. They described the boat in the beginning as old and rusty and decrepit. And I guess they didn't want the boat to be retired without them. So they all just decide to end their lives together. Like reminiscing about this old, great experience. This is like very romanticized.
Yeah. Like it's
like Romeo and Juliet kind of suicide.
Opposite.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Kind of.
And I think in like kind of warming up to the couple, they wanted them to kind of be left with, this is what this boat means to us in love, and you're a new couple going out into the world or whatever, and maybe this will happen for you, but it's not your time to, but they couldn't just say that,
The old people are there to end their lives, but they do. It's not a horror in the sense that they take the young people off and they provide an escape for them. And they also, like you said, Taylor, they give them the gift of this shared experience.
Yeah.
Like, here, take this with you for your life.
And they're to create their own experience, whatever that may be. But this is not part of their experience. Like, this is ours. So we're going to send you off and...
with a part of this. Don't they say, like, doesn't the...
We're going to send you off with this trauma to live through for the rest of your life.
But the characters, they don't say that. Doesn't the woman say that she feels warm or something at the end?
Yeah,
that was
she did.
Like one of the final lines.
I think she realized just the relationships and how, I mean, she was like newly married or whatever, in love. I don't know if they had just gotten married or...
Yeah, I think.
But yeah, she felt a glimpse of like what their older lives were going to be, maybe, and that they would create their own experiences.
Yeah, they're not horrified, even though they just saw like a boat full of people kill themselves.
Even though it's pretty, it's a Titanic-y kind of.
Yeah.
But they got a window into the understanding of love as perceived from people who have lived out a life with somebody else.
Let me ask you this, Andres.
Older and wiser.
Could they have that same experience if the old people would just docked the boat at England and got off? could those people have still felt how special that was if they didn't end their own lives? And
now they got to die.
It would have been not dramatic for the story.
Well, I think there's certainly the concept of the finite nature of life, no?
Yeah.
Everybody in there was old and decrepit, just like the ship.
They were all ready to go.
Right, and they were like, well, that's like the spirit being stronger than physical reality. And they said, well, we're going to have a grand old time here, and come what may, and this is what we want. And
well, it's not come what may, right? Because it's like, we're going to end
They knew that what was going to happen, I think.
Yeah. Well, right, no, they did. They did. It was all planned.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Lady Anne was going to be retired, and their spouses began dying, and themselves dying. So they sort of embraced that. No?
Yeah, they did.
And this couple got a ride and a glimpse of what they knew.
But if they would have not killed themselves and just like shared the dancing with them, and then everyone just docked and got off in England, would it have been as special for the couple?
But then they would have gotten even older and like crapped their pants and required all kinds of care. And this is a nice way. They were all like their clothes, they were like British people,
Dialysis.
No one had to crap their pants.
Forget that, right? Yeah, it's some dignity, So you know what? Life is fine.
I think still, the more impact. There's more impact with the ship sinking because it just showed what this boat and this memories of the boat meant to all of them, and they all shared a similar special experience, and they thought what better setting to kind of send off than to share this place that we all know it. We all spent our honeymoons and youth. There's
something about the fact that the boat was going to retire that
it was a tribute to the
it threatened boat. Them, right? They didn't want to see the boat be retired before them. They wanted to all go together with it. Mm-hmm. Like it was almost like the boat being retired would have been a symbolism of their love ending.
Yeah.
Like the boat was intertwined
with their lives.
With their lives and their loves for their spouses.
Yeah.
So they were like perhaps in a way kind of one.
Yeah.
In some way.
Touchy-feely.
Very touchy-feely
crap.
Very unlike Arnold.
Very unlike Arnold.
You're only getting better at that.
See, it means more, though, talking about it now, because that story didn't sit as well with me. It was kind of just more, okay, I'm probably going to forget that one more easily. But now talking about it and realizing just what the boat meant for these older people.
It hits you more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I prefer stories like this to the, in his, not his image, but the beautiful people.
You prefer this one over that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
all right. Well, I think that's it. That's all the stories we're going to cover. There are more in the book, and if there's any other ones that someone want to mention, a couple that I like was a Classic Affair, which was about. Well, that one just kind of showcased his love of race cars.
Death in the Country, I thought was
I'd like to read
cool
more.
Little story.
That was a cool one. Okay.
One that I read and I didn't understand one word that was going on in the entire story was Night Ride.
Oh, Night Ride, that one's about the jazz musicians. You know what? I remember you told me that. I liked that one. You know what? And the Lady Anne reminded me of Night Ride because it also had this subtle menace to it.
I liked the fact that I like jazz, so I kind of like the musicianship about it.
Yeah, it's about a jazz quintet or something like that.
You could tell they were all drug addicts, or at least there were some of them that were drug addicts.
They all had
they
addictions.
Spoke in very strung out kind of weird ways.
I just liked how I didn't read the other ones. I just didn't have time to get through. But I liked how they all had different. They were all very different, but they could all
like the race car one was very different than these other ones, and jazz one was very different.
They were all well suited to a Twilight episode with different themes. And did you find that the other ones you read could have been translated?
Yeah, a lot of them had this twist ending. Like there was one called The Place of Meeting, which is about vampires waking up after an apocalypse. Like they just they wake up and like everyone's dead, so like they can't suck anyone's blood. So like, all right, back to sleep.
Go back into the coffins.
There was the other one that I personally found it very, but it was the one. Was it The Sorcerers? About the new couple that just moved into the
Sorcerer's
neighborhood.
Moon?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah.
Wow, was that disturbing?
That's a shorter one.
That's about these people that they are trying to find the next thing to to kind of get off on, like the new exciting thing. They're like, they're at one point they're like, let's do a bank robbery or whatever.
Yeah, and let's crash a plane.
Yeah.
Let's
rob it. Yeah.
The father in me doesn't like the kind of stories. I don't know why. It's very disturbing.
When you're dad.
I think a personal favorite of his I saw somewhere was The Magic Man, which is about a traveling musician or traveling magician who he returns to this town that he did magic previously, And he does his magic show again for this townspeople. They're all excited. And then they're like, show us your tricks. And he does show them how he does all the tricks. And then one by one, they all just kind of walk away because they know how the magic works. And he's kind of contemplating. He's like, why are they leaving? He's like, now they're magicians too. They know the secret. And like, it was kind of like symbolic about what Beaumont felt about his stories and just sharing the art with the world or something like that. I don't know. He just really liked that one, I guess. It was a good one.
I liked the style because it was very kind of straightforward and accessible. It wasn't too like wordy or flowery, which I generally don't like because I like, I like more, action forward moving kind of stories. And they were all pretty, I didn't know what to expect, but it was nice to have, it was relatable and, easy to read. And I definitely want to read more of the stories in here. Mm-hmm. Just to compare them and see now, what would that be like as a Twilight Zone episode, or could it easily translate into it?
Yeah. Or how do I get the rights to this story?
Well, let me just go around the horn real quick, and anyone can say any other final thoughts that they had. Out of like a scale of 1 to 5 stars, what would you rate just overall, not the individual stories, but your overall experience? I guess I can start with you, Kaelin.
Okay.
1 out of 5 stars, 5 being the top. What would you rate this? What you read?
Just as a whole.
Yeah, as a whole.
Probably like a 4.5.
Okay.
Out of 5. Yeah.
So you really liked it.
Generally, 3 would be just like, okay, not bad, and probably not remember it too much. But 4 is like, yeah, it touched on something a little bit more. I could take something away from it, and then 4.5 would be just a little more than that. Like, something that you could go back to and reread and really make me take something more out of it and want to keep reading other works by him. So I would say a good solid 4.5.
Okay. Mike, what about you?
Collection 4 stars.
Nice. Andres?
I would give between 3 and 4.
Okay.
It's
like 3.5.
Yep. Yeah. I kind of enjoy nonfiction because it's stuff that I can apply to my life. So when I like this kind of science fiction that I like, it's more like cerebral, that explores what it means to be a sentient being, for example.
And some of these stories get into that.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
they do. But
psychological.
Certainly in this image. But yeah, there was a lot of like thrill. And like not knowing until you know, and then once you know, there's not a lot more there, at least that I could see. So yeah, 3 to 4, like more perhaps entertainment. There's
escapism.
Maybe, yes, if I understand that correct.
I did feel like when I was reading these stories, a lot of times I was reading them and I was kind of like, almost like having fun, like, okay, I know there's going to be a twist. I wonder how he's going to flip this now at the end. Like it was going, and I just kind of was like waiting for the flip. Where it would twist or whatever.
Yeah, but to me, that falls more on the entertainment side.
Right, I agree with you.
I want to take something away, like a concept or a new perspective.
I agree with you.
But no, pretty solid. That's why 3.5.
Yeah.
I think I'm the opposite. I think I just like yarn.
Pure entertainment.
My life is stressful enough.
Escapism, then, kind of, just to get...
That's more your
and
forte.
be entertained and kind of...
Yeah.
Well, Twilight Zone was that for me, I think, just watching, because I hadn't watched it for years until, just a few years ago. I mean, I know we'll get into that, but that was more like an entertainment kind of thing for me.
All right, well, and I'll say I would give this 4 stars. Probably I wouldn't give it like a 5 or more because of what we're saying, that those more escapist elements. But I did think he does explore these interesting kind of like reflections on humanity and what it means to be human and a person. And there is depth to these stories, and they were fun. And it was a good collection. I read the whole thing, and I liked it. I liked all of them. It was good. It was good.
Even to like apply some of those themes to modern day. I mean, was this... Yeah. When did he start these? In 50s or 60s? Or at least that early, because they were...
Human nature
Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I think the first one was like 52, the first one we talked about. Yeah, they felt very relevant. They didn't feel super dated. Yeah, you could still
relate to them. You didn't feel like, this was then, but, what about today? But, just themes you could still relate to.
So, the podcast, our website for the podcast is nodeodorant.com, so you can check us out there. Mike, you have a YouTube channel, right? Do you know your handle on YouTube if someone wants to look you up?
Well, you can do a search on YouTube for Mike O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Usually you have to. There's so much information on YouTube. So
yeah, you don't know how to get to your own YouTube channel.
Mike O'Reilly, and search Blink of an Eye.
Yeah, you have that film on there.
That is the best way to do it right now. And then you'll get the rest of my next movie is going to be on there.
Okay, cool. So you can be fine. And I'll put a link on the website to get to your YouTube channel. Andres, what about your, you have like an Instagram account that you have like your artwork and stuff on?
I do. You can find me by typing my name, Andres Sercovich, Andres, and Sercovich. I feel like I'm talking to a representative on the phone. or AH Serco.
All right, cool.
I'd like to, if I could link our thing on my own. I mean, I've been kind of dormant on my...
Yeah, you have your YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube. I do booktube.
Booktube, nice.
So people talk about books they read, what they want to read, do reviews and stuff. And
are you the bookworm girl?
I was the bookworm gal, but I kind of changed it back to just my regular name. So,
Kaelin O'Reilly.
Kaelin O'Reilly could be found there too. So
I'll put a link to that.
Might be a way to like re-jumpstart my channel because I haven't been. It's been a while since
I saw some of those. They were good.
Posted anything. Thank you.
Yeah, you should keep doing it. And you're fun. On Goodreads too and stuff like that.
Yeah, Goodreads.
It's a great book site. All right, and with that, I'll just say goodbye. Everyone say goodbye.
You.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Okay, all right.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode, or to read our show notes and find us on social media, visit nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit ryanseano'reilly.com. The theme music for this podcast was written by John Doyle from the band I Decline. You can visit him at i-decline.com. Voiceover for this podcast was provided by me, Margaret O'Reilly. Well, that concludes our episode. We hope you've learned a lot. Again, thanks for listening to our show. And always remember, there is no deodorant in outer space.
Yeah, why do we have that music on?
Yeah, you're not going to hear any music.
Ryan's going to
I'll start off with a quote.
Theme song.
All right, in 5, in 4. This thing. Not how I want it. In 3, in 2, in 1. Yeah.
But they couldn't just say that,
Hello. Hi. We got it.
Right on time.
We got blankets and everything, right? On that, is there blankets on that? I think there is, right? Yeah. Yep. We're good. Thanks so much. Okay. All right. We're live.
We're live. You don't need to call again.
You're on the air. Go ahead.
I'm thrown off now.
Yeah, me too. I guess
I'll just to get it back on track, that could be the blooper reel.